The shift was almost imperceptible at first. It began, as all truly terrifying things do. In the mundane dot, it was 1:47 a.m., the hour of the dying shift, the time when the fluorescent glow of the pizza parlor's kitchen seemed harshest, and the only soundtrack was the hiss of the ventilation system and the distant, lonely wail of an ambulance passing on the highway. For 16 months, I had been the graveyard shift anchor for Slice of Heaven, delivering lukewarm comfort and questionable pepperoni to the insomniacs, late shift workers, and college students of the sprawling, indifferent city known only as Sector 7. My current mindset was a precise blend of caffeine fatigue, the sticky residue of dried tomato sauce on my fingertips, and the singular, focused desire to clock out. The last run of the night at Classic Supreme plus a 2-liter of diet soda, receipt taped to the box where the practice thumb was. Usually a quick slam dunk to an apartment complex near the main arterial road, predictable, routine. My brain had already begun the process of decoupling from the job, calculating the total tip take, and mentally cueing the comfort of my own saggy armchair. But the ticket, spat out by the ancient thermal printer which always sounded like a dying snake, had the address 14 Ode to Riverbend Terrace. I froze. Riverbend Terrace. The name itself was wrong. It sounded too manicured, too expensive, too quiet for a typical delivery radius, which usually comprised cinder block multifamily units and neon-blasted strip malls. Critically, the route my internal memory mapped out instantly rejected the address. I knew Sector 7 like the back of my hand, a map etched in traffic patterns, streetlights that flickered, and aggressive potholes. There was a Riverbend Drive, a sprawling, soulless development of McMansions built 20 years ago, and now slowly decomposing into suburban blight. But no Riverbend Terrace. I glanced over at Maria, the lone dispatcher, whose face was illuminated solely by the sickly blue light of her monitor. She was chewing gum with the relentless, rhythmic intensity of a machine. "Hey, Maria, where's 14 Ode to Riverbend Terrace?" I asked, tapping the paper. "I don't recognize the street." She didn't look up. "New subdivision, probably. The system updated the service area last week. Just follow the GPS, Miles. It's the last one. Go." Her tone, curt and dismissive, was enough. The system, the infallible, profit-driven digital oracle that dictated our routes, our service area, and our paychecks. The system said the address existed. It existed. My internal map, built on months of concrete experience, was simply obsolete. I grabbed the keys, the oversized thermal bag, and the plastic pouch of soda, walking out into the biting late-night air. 2008 Corolla, my faithful steed of low-wage commerce, smelled faintly of old leather and garlic. The mundane was asserting itself forcefully, attempting to smother the small, fluttering sense of unease. I plugged the address into the old GPS unit mounted on the dash. The unit hesitated. It didn't just calculate the route. It seemed to discover it. A faint greenish line slowly crawled across the screen, carving a path into what appeared to be empty, unmapped space past the familiar boundaries of Sector 7. The journey began routinely, down Main Street, past the closed liquor store, the 24-hour laundromat, and the flickering billboard advertising cheap legal services. I crossed the concrete viaduct over the dried-up creek, the official boundary of our known world, and immediately, the nature of the drive changed. The familiar street lights, those orange sodium vapor lamps that cast everything in a cheap, jaundiced hue, gave way to an older, softer light, the bluish-white mercury lamps of an antiquated municipal district. The asphalt lost its aggressive patchwork of repairs and became smoother, older, unbroken concrete. The sound of my tires on the road shifted too. Less slap, more hush. I realized I was heading toward the residential core of Sector 7's adjacent twin, the historical Sector 8, a place we actively avoided because their pizza was notoriously better, and their residents were notoriously anti-delivery. This wasn't just a new subdivision. It was a jurisdictional transgression. The GPS kept directing me deeper. It had stopped using street names on the screen and was simply guiding me by arrows and distance markers. Turn left in 500 feet. Destination in 1.2 miles. My brain, starved of the linguistic markers of my known map, felt the first subtle twinge of cognitive dissonance. The architecture changed again. The harsh, modular boxes of Sector 7 were replaced by genuine, standalone houses, not the crumbling, Historic ones I knew, but houses built in a specific, forgotten style, steep roofs, large bay windows, and brick facades painted in muted, uniform colors beige, dove gray, forest green. They had a uniform, quiet perfection that felt deliberately curated, almost theatrical. And they were silent. No barking dogs, no distant sirens, no porch lights left on by mistake. Just absolute, profound silence. I turned onto Riverbend Terrace, or what the GPS called Riverbend Terrace. The street itself was a gentle, arcing cul-de-sac lined with tall, thick oaks, their branches interlocking overhead to create a canopy that swallowed the inadequate moonlight. There were no sidewalks, just manicured lawns that rolled seamlessly up to the road edge. And there were no addresses, not in the traditional sense. No reflective numbers on the curb, no brightly painted mailboxes. Just a row of identical silent houses. My breath hitched. The GPS announced, destination reached. 1402 Riverbend Terrace. But which house was it? I slowed the Corolla to a crawl, the only engine noise in the entire silent corridor. Houses looked like stage props waiting for the curtain to rise. They were all immaculate, all dark, and all profoundly unsettling in their stillness. There was no sign of life, not a single illuminated window, not even the faint blue flash of a television set visible through a gap in the curtains. I stopped the car exactly where the GPS instructed me to, directly in front of a house that was, somehow, the most unsettling of all. It was a two-story, pale gray Victorian revival, meticulously maintained. Yet it lacked the character markers that every house acquires over time. No garden gnomes, no rusty basketball hoop, no half-raked pile of leaves. It was perfectly generic, and it was unfamiliar. I had delivered to thousands of houses in this city. Even the new, blank subdivisions had a template, a rhythm, an echo of something I'd seen before. This house, however, felt manufactured in a vacuum. It had no context in my memory. It simply was. I knew, with the cold certainty of instinct, that I had never driven down this road, never seen this facade, never approached this porch. My rational mind tried to argue it's just a new neighborhood, Miles. You're tired, but my gut screamed that this place was an aberration, a physical anomaly superimposed onto my known reality. I killed the engine. The resulting silence was immense, deafening. My ears strained, waiting for a sound to break the stillness, a cricket, a distant car, anything. Only the faint, dying tick-tick-tick of the Corolla's cooling engine offered any sign that time was moving. I looked at the pizza box, supreme, a standard order, mundane object that felt grotesquely out of place in this profound quiet. My hand went to the door handle, but I hesitated. The routine had failed. The usual psychological script for a delivery: get out, walk fast, get cash. Get back had been interrupted. I glanced back at the pizza box one more time, running my thumb over the taped receipt. I needed to confirm the name. The name on the receipt was Jones. The Jones family, I murmured, tasting the name. Generic, disposable. It fit the house perfectly. I took a deep breath, grabbed the pizza bag and the soda, and stepped out of the car. The temperature drop was immediate and sharp. The air here was colder, damper, carrying the faint, clean scent of wet earth and something else, something mineral, like concrete dust or freshly turned soil. The sound of my shoes crunching softly on the smooth asphalt seemed aggressive, loud, a violation of the neighborhood's determined silence. I walked up the short, immaculate driveway. No gravel, no cracks. The front porch was simple, white-painted wood, completely unadorned. No welcome mat, no ceramic planters, no holiday decorations, despite the season. The house was a blank slate waiting to be written upon. As I reached the porch, I noticed a single light source. Not a porch light, but a small, rectangular panel of light emanating from the glass insert of the front door. It wasn't the warm yellow of incandescent bulbs, nor the harsh white of LEDs. It was a pale, neutral, almost sickly gray light. It looked like light struggling to exist. I placed the thermal bag down carefully on the porch floor. The pizza box felt hot against the cold wood. I reached for the doorbell, and then I saw the detail that finally tripped the alarm system in my exhausted, rationalizing brain. On the front window, obscured slightly by sheer gray curtains, was a faint sticker. A sticker that the Jones family, or any resident of 1402 Riverbend Terrace, shouldn't have. It was a slice of heaven loyalty sticker. It was a small, grinning cartoon image of a chef holding a pizza peel surrounded by stars. We only gave those out to customers who had placed over 50 orders in a year. They were rare, distinct, and only given out to our most reliable local customers, the ones whose addresses were etched deep into my 16 months of experience. But this was an unfamiliar house. This was a wrong address. How could they have earned that sticker? The cognitive dissonance was immediate and physically sickening. My heart started thumping hard against my ribs, a loud, frantic drumbeat in the profound silence. My hand hovering near the doorbell, I retreated a half step. I tried to connect the dots. New system update. Transferred loyalty data. They moved in last week. But the logic felt flimsy, cheap. The sticker felt like a deliberate mistake, a planted seed of familiarity designed to draw me in. I took a picture of the door with my phone, not for evidence, but for proof of the anomaly. The phone's flash illuminated the porch for a split second, revealing the perfect smooth grain of the wood dot. I finally pressed the doorbell dot. It did not chime. It did not buzz. It emitted a single, low, resonant tone, a sound that wasn't electronic or mechanical, but acoustic, deep, and slightly mournful. It felt less like a notification and more like an invocation. I waited. The silence returned, immense. I counted slowly, the way veterans of the graveyard shift are trained to. 1001, 1002, 1003, at 1009. The sound of movement came from inside. It wasn't the scuff of shoes on carpet or the squeak of a floorboard. It was a slow, heavy drag. The sound of something large and dense being pulled across a smooth surface. It stopped directly behind the door. The gray light in the glass panel did not change, but the atmosphere behind the door became palpably heavier, denser. I felt the distinct, uncomfortable sensation of being watched not through a peephole, but through the solid, unmoving wood. Then the lock mechanism disengaged. It wasn't a quick, mechanical click of a deadbolt. It was a slow, agonizing grind, the sound of metal reluctantly separating from metal. A sound that felt ancient and rusty. The door finally opened. Quickly, not welcomingly, but slowly, deliberately, stopping exactly 1 foot from the frame. The man standing in the doorway was unremarkable. Mid-50s, average height, wearing a perfectly clean gray cotton t-shirt and dark sweatpants. He had thin, light brown hair combed neatly across his scalp. His face was round, his skin pale, almost translucent in the weak gray light from behind him. He had the passive, slightly vacant expression of someone who had been recently woken from a very deep, medicinal sleep. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He simply extended a hand, palm up, in a gesture that was utterly devoid of expectation or emotion. It was a gesture of receipt. I stepped forward, adrenaline making my movements jerky. Slice of heaven, supreme in a diet, I stammered, holding out the pizza bag. That's 30 to 50. The man's eyes, light brown and slightly too large, remained fixed on mine. They didn't move to the pizza or the soda. They registered my face, my uniform, my presence. His hand, still extended, rotated slightly, and his palm nestled perfectly on the lifeline. Were 3 crumpled $10 bills and 2 quarters, $30.50. Exactly $2 short of the total dot. My exhaustion immediately wrestled with my professionalism. $2 on the last run. I was trained to point out the shortage, to wait for the customer to sheepishly find the change. It was part of the routine, but something about the man's absolute stillness, the unnerving perfection of the pre-counted, slightly short funds, made the words catch in my throat. I couldn't bear to break the profound silence with an argument over $2. That's fine, I heard myself say, the words feeling foreign and small. Keep the change. The man didn't acknowledge the statement. His hand remained open, waiting. I placed a hot thermal bag into his hand. His fingers closed round the bag, not quickly, but with a slow, deliberate strength that suggested immense patience. He didn't look down at the pizza. Thank you, sir. Have a good night, I mumbled, already backing away. desperate to return to the familiar confines of my car dot as I took my second step backward. The man finally spoke. His voice was not the gruff, sleepy sound I expected from a middle-aged man. It was soft, even, and perfectly modulated like a synthesized recording played back at low volume. The delivery was expected, Miles. My entire body locked up. My blood turned instantly to ice. I didn't recognize the voice, but the name Miles was the knife twist. I hadn't given him my name. I hadn't said a single personal word beyond the order details. My name wasn't on the receipt. Only Maria or the manager knew my name. I spun back, my eyes fixed on his face. The man's expression hadn't changed, but the gray light from behind him seemed to intensify, making his eyes appear darker, deeper, utterly opaque. "How?" I started. He interrupted, the soft voice cutting through the silence without raising volume. "It's the timing. Timing is important for the assimilation, and you are 2 minutes late." Assimilation, not the word, was a non sequitur. Word from a technical manual or a psychological thriller, profoundly misplaced in a late-night transaction over a supreme pizza. I didn't wait for another word. Fear, pure and primal, overcame my fatigue and my professionalism. I turned and ran not a panic sprint, but a clumsy, desperate scramble down the immaculate driveway, my feet stumbling on the smooth asphalt. I ripped open the car door, threw myself inside, and fumbled with the key in the ignition. The engine caught instantly, roaring to life aloud. Vulgar intrusion into the neighborhood's silence. I didn't bother reversing. I slammed the shifter into drive and tore down Riverbend Terrace, tires squealing in protest. Headlights briefly flashing across the perfectly manicured, perfectly silent houses. I glanced in the rearview mirror as I hit the corner. The gray house, 1402 to Riverbend Terrace, was completely dark. The front door was closed. There was no sign of the man, no sign of the pizza. The panic did not subside. It intensified. I had left the known world, delivered to an aberration, and been named by the void. I drove for 20 minutes, heart hammering, until I reached the familiar orange glow of the sodium lamps. The sight of the flickering billboard, the chaotic traffic of Main Street, and the sound of distant sirens was a shocking, comforting return to reality when I finally pulled into the empty, cracked parking lot of Slice of Heaven. Maria was gone. The lights were out. The front door was locked. My shift had ended 2 minutes ago. I stumbled inside the back entrance, heading straight for the computer terminal. I had to delete that order. I had to prove it never happened. The screen was black. I hit the power button. It whirred to life, slow and agonizing. I navigated through the labyrinthine interface. Orders placed, orders delivered, order history. I found the transaction easily. Order number 447, time 1:47 a.m. Item Supreme Pizza, Diet Soda, address 1402 Riverbend Terrace. Customer, Jones. And at the bottom, there was a field that was never filled out until the driver returned and submitted the cash tip received. $2.00. The transaction had been marked complete, but where did the $2 come from? He was short. He only gave me $30.50. I had eaten the $2, dismissing the shortage in my panic. The receipt should have shown $30.50 received. I stared at the screen, sweat cooling on my brow. The system insisted the Jones family had paid the full amount plus a $2 tip. I ran my hand through my hair, utterly bewildered. I needed coffee. I needed sleep. I needed to pretend the last or hadn't happened. I went to the employee locker room to retrieve my jacket. The fluorescent tube above the bank of lockers flickered, struggling to maintain its light. I reached for my locker, number 14, and then I saw it, taped neatly, perfectly flat to the front of the steel door of my locker. Number 14. It was a small, grinning cartoon image of a chef holding a pizza peel, surrounded by stars, a Slice of Heaven loyalty sticker. My stomach dropped into the frozen depths of the earth. I hadn't touched the locker since before I left on the run. The sticker hadn't been there. My mind raced. Did I put it there myself earlier in the night in a bout of forgetfulness? No, we only had that stack of stickers at the cash register. I had been nowhere near the register. I realized I couldn't remember a single thing about the transaction beyond the man's opaque eyes and the chilling, synthesized sound of his voice. I couldn't remember leaving the sticker on the porch. I couldn't remember him taking it. I touched the glossy surface of the sticker. It felt warm. I tore it off the locker door, crumpling it instinctively in my hand. Then, I looked down at the floor. Next to the crumpled sticker was a small, almost invisible piece of white paper. I knelt, my knees protesting against the cold tile floor, and picked it up. It was a fragment of the order receipt. Not my copy, but the customer's copy torn off the bottom of the main ticket. It was slightly greasy from the pizza box. On the bottom, printed clearly in the thermal ink, was the small, final line of text, the line that was always blank on the customer's receipt, until the amount was processed by the system. Tip $2, but scrawled faintly beneath the printed line, in a light brown ink that looked eerily like diluted blood, was a single handwritten word, Miles. I dropped the paper as if it were burning my fingers. The man in the gray house, the man who knew my name, knew the specific timing, and knew exactly how much cash to present. Despite the system error, he hadn't just seen me, he had known me. I realized the sticker wasn't a warning or an anomaly. It was a marker. Physical item from my known world, placed in an unknown world, then returned to my space. A contamination of my reality. The transfer was complete. The house 1402 Riverbend Terrace was a decoy. The customer, Mr. Jones, was a placeholder. The entire routine was an elaborate time delivery for one specific package, me. They wanted me to complete the run. They needed the transition to be routine, the violation to be internal. They needed the address to be unfamiliar, but the sticker to be familiar. The cognitive dissonance was the tool of assimilation. I thought back to the sound the door lock made, that slow, grinding drag of metal on metal. It wasn't rusty. It was separating from a deep, pressurized containment. I looked around the empty, silent locker room. The flickering fluorescent light, the source of the high-pitched hum I hated, suddenly seemed to vibrate with a malignant intelligence. The air was cold, the silence vast. I realized I couldn't go home. Home was now contaminated. Home was where the identity was stolen, where the assimilation would complete. The man knew my name. He knew my timing. He knew where I lived. The pizza delivery was over. Package had been delivered, but the delivery had only just begun. I grabbed my jacket. I needed to see the route again. I needed to find out who ordered the pizza, not the Supreme, but the order of me. I needed to find the original location of 1402 Riverbend Terrace, the real house. The real people who lived there before they were replaced by the perfectly silent mannequins. I walked back out to the terminal. Deleting the order was no longer an option. It was a record, a proof. I noticed something strange on the map display. A faint, almost invisible data layer that Maria must have accidentally activated. It showed the original boundaries of the service area before the system update. I zoomed in on the Riverbend area. There was Riverbend Drive, Riverbend Lane, Riverbend Way, but no Riverbend Terrace. I kept zooming, increasing the magnification until the pixels blurred into abstract colored blocks. Then I saw it, a single, tiny anomaly. A data node, a single address point that the system had designated as 1402 Riverbend Terrace. It wasn't a street. It wasn't a subdivision. The data point was located directly over the Sector 7 Municipal Cemetery, the oldest, most sprawling, most forgotten cemetery in the entire area. Bordering the dried-up creek, the house, the perfect, silent gray house, was built on top of the dead. It was a structure of pure, organized silence, a house with no history, no character, built to facilitate one single, final delivery. The man in the gray shirt, the gray light, the quiet perfection. He hadn't just woken up. He had been unearthed, and the tip he left, the $2 short, the precise amount, was a deliberate act of unsettling perfection. He knew the cost of the routine, and he gave exactly the value of the routine. Subtracting the value of my attention, I stood there, the weight of 16 months of mundane service crushing down on me. I was the vehicle. I was the bridge. was the final link between the dead and the living. I knew then that the delivery had not been paid for with money. It had been paid for with my time. 16 months of predictable routes, predictable fatigue, predictable desires. They had mapped my existence, calculated my movements, and timed the assimilation perfectly. I looked at the loyalty sticker, crumpled and warm in my pocket. The sticker proved that the Jones family had placed over 50 orders before the house existed, before the street existed, before the system update. They were not new customers. They were the oldest customers. The silence of that neighborhood, the absence of sound, the absence of life, the absence of history was not neglect. It was containment. The silence was holding the atmosphere tight, preventing the noise of the past from escaping. I got back into the Corolla. The scent of old leather and garlic no longer felt comforting. It felt like a trap. I needed to drive. I needed to escape the boundaries of Sector 7, the map of my assimilation. I started the engine, pulling out of the parking lot and back onto Main Street. I drove past the laundromat, past the billboard, past the liquor store. I crossed the viaduct over the dried-up creek dot, and then I saw the light. It wasn't the orange glow of the sodium lamps. It wasn't the harsh white of the pizza parlor dot. It was a single, pale, neutral, almost sickly gray light dot. It was coming from my own house. I braked hard, the tires squealing a horrific, loud sound that was instantly swallowed by the night. The gray light was spilling from my living room window, and I knew with absolute certainty that no one was home. I lived alone. The windows of my house, my familiar house, my safe house, now looked large and empty, reflecting the gray light outward. The man had not needed my address. He had merely needed my timing. He had been 2 minutes late because I was 2 minutes late. The transaction was complete, and the package, the assimilation, had been delivered to the final destination. My house was no longer my house. It was 14 Ode to Riverbend Terrace. It was the structure of silence, the place where things waited. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and called the one number I knew by heart. My mother's number. It rang once, twice, then a click. A voice answered. It wasn't my mother's voice. It was soft, even, and perfectly modulated, like a synthesized recording played back at low volume. Call was expected. Miles, and then the voice changed, shifting into a familiar, slightly strained tone. The voice of the man in the gray shirt. We just finished assimilating the Supreme. Miles, it was surprisingly accurate. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The voice continued, shifting again, this time into a warm, utterly familiar tone, the voice of my mother. Why don't you come home, sweetheart? We have so much to catch up on. We've been waiting 15 years for this delivery. I dropped the phone. It shattered on the floorboard of the Corolla, the sound of breaking plastic swallowed by the night. I looked back toward my house, illuminated by that sickly gray light. The pizza delivery was over. Routine was completed. The assimilation was final. I was the only one left standing on the wrong side of the door.